Great. Oh, don't get too excited. Calm down. Calm down. No, y'all, it is my joy to come and speak with you this evening. Rob and I met when we were in seminary, and so I've known Rob for about 20 years now, and he's become a dear friend and actually a dear partner on this journey as well. And so it's a joy to come and serve y'all. I am a rambler, and because the Lord loves you, He put it on my spirit to actually make some notes, so I don't just ramble on and on and on. So that's why I might be looking down here. Good. All right, I'll be quiet. Then I'll let you talk.
So the first question: tell us a little bit about your own journey with anxiety and depression. How old were you when that became part of your life? And what kind of give us a flyover view of what that's looked like?
Of course. Looking back on it, I was always kind of a nervous kid, just really kind of anxious all the time and worried about things. And I actually stuttered pretty profoundly to where I needed a lot of speech therapy as a child. Kind of a chicken or the egg thing. I don't know if my stuttering caused my anxiety and low self-esteem or the opposite. But either way, that was such a big part of my life. And I always just felt like I didn't measure up. I felt the imposter syndrome. If you've ever heard that before, you feel like you've got everybody in the room fooled that you're an imposter. Because deep down inside, you know the truth that you're not nearly as good or as great as you've fooled everyone to think that you are. I saw relationships as really fragile because I just really didn't see myself as lovable. And so I was always really afraid of hurting anyone's feelings or really doing anything that might destroy a relationship. Keep in mind, I'm looking back at this now at 47. I know I look good for 47. You'll have to say it. But looking back on this, even when I was in my preteen years and all that, it was just more of a feeling and of almost like a complete truth, right? Like this is just the way that I am. All that kind of built up, and I thought that if I got in the right job, I was a lawyer for a couple of years, and I hated that. And then I went into seminary and had a great first job, and second job, great church. It was just a tough season, and a lot of kind of what was building from a depression and anxiety standpoint really exploded. On the 29th of April in 2011, I was doing a big wedding at a big church downtown, and as I looked out, all of the people who I felt like were in charge of my future actually sort of held judgment over me as a priest, were standing there watching me, and y'all, I had a panic attack that literally shut me down. I couldn't talk. I rambled, I stumbled through some of the parts. Praise the Lord, I had another priest helping me that day. And I had, if you've ever had a panic attack, just your whole body gets involved and the adrenaline starts pumping through and you can't breathe and just the whole world begins to shrink down. You feel like the weight of the world's on your shoulders. And after that, I just went back to my office and I cried, and my wife came up and was like, "Are you okay? What's wrong? Something's wrong." And so that began really kind of where all this began sort of really become very acute, from just sort of just being general to being very acute. I finally, after not sleeping, in fact, I was talking to someone about this today. I slept about 5 hours over 5 days because my body was so amped up. My hands were tingling constantly. I was on constant alert. And I finally went to the doctor because something had to change. And they diagnosed me with the generalized anxiety disorder. I was really dealing with the anxiety part. The depression part had yet to kick in. But my first response was just to ignore it. I think I ignored it for a good 3 months before I finally went to the doctor, got diagnosed. And then, you'll hear more about this as we go on. But the third part was just accepting that as part of my life. And I'll build on this throughout the course of our conversation. But just I love how the Lord works through everybody, right? the Lord's servants to us are everywhere, not just wearing collars. And this secular doctor who I was seeing said one of the most comforting things I've ever heard in this process. And she said, Hamilton, remember, this is a medical condition. It's not a character flaw. This is a medical condition. This isn't a character flaw. Because at the time where I was ignoring this, I was mourning this, one of the big things was, here I am. And of course, just so you know, this manifested itself. The anxiety came back whenever public speaking came back. But I ignored it because, or I really wrestled with it, really mourned it, because I thought, here I am, a 35-year-old man in a profession where public speaking is important, and I can't even do that. I can't even handle the normal stresses of my job without shutting down. And so, here we go.
Are there any other, you spoke to going to the doctor, are there any other kind of treatments that you experienced in your journey, whether that was going to counseling or therapy or
Absolutely.
medication? Will you share about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that because of what she said was so helpful. We had some family history of anxiety. And just as a side note here, I have a great dad, but he's an old school guy, so he kept stuff private. And so I had this huge panic attack, and after I called him and I told him that I'm finally getting treatment for this stuff, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I've been on anti-anxiety meds for 20 years." I'm like, "Thanks for telling me, Dad." But anyway, there's sort of I call it like the three-legged stool of health. Okay, and we're going to go into this in more detail, but the first thing that they prescribed me with was some Lexapro, which is an SSRI. If you don't know, the medical science behind depression and anxiety is still evolving, but they know a couple things. What they do know, one of the physiological issues of people who have generalized anxiety disorder is that your body takes up serotonin too quickly. So serotonin, if you don't know, is what you produce to kind of calm you down, right? Happens a lot at night when the lights go out. Well, if you are predisposed to depression, part of the issue is your body sort of sucks it back in really quickly. So the chemical that your body releases to keep you relaxed disappears. I may be getting ahead of myself on this, but I don't care. If you don't know just some of the science underneath it, when I say it's a medical condition, it's literally your adrenal system, your fight or flight system, which is a good thing. It's on overdrive. It overreacts, right? And so the medicine was absolutely important. I really mourned psychologically having to take crazy pills, right? Why can't I just be normal? Why can't I just function like everyone else can? Why do I have to take a pill every day just to deal with the stresses of life? But the more that I thought about it, in the same way that we would, we don't make fun of people who have diabetes for taking insulin, right? They didn't choose that. At the same time, I didn't choose to be depressed. I had genes, and so the medicine was crucial. Staying on the medicine was a crucial. So one leg of the stool, if you will, is your physiological thing. Also, what you eat, the amount of sleep you get. I needed a CPAP machine and all this stuff. Sleep matters, and what you eat matters, and what you drink matters, or what you don't drink matters even more. But then there was the psychological side. I have a good friend. He's a psychiatrist, and I began to see him every other week. Now it's every month. I tried to go one time 3 months without seeing him, and it didn't go well. And really, they just used the good old-fashioned, what's called cognitive behavioral therapy. Maybe you've heard it called talk therapy. I thought because I was really hesitant. I remember walking into the psychiatrist's office, and if I could have worn a fake beard, I would have, right? I would have, I was embarrassed. I could not believe that I'm in this I'm going to go see the crazy doctor. Would a parishioner see me in there? Would a friend see me in there? My reputation's ruined. And I was embarrassed. I'd show up late and just sort of sneak in the back door, but what I realized is that what a psychiatrist does and the treatment that was so helpful was opposed to sort of diving in deep and dark and they're going to kind of change me. really what it was is they just talked me through these ways that I understood myself. It's to rewrite the tape of your life. Maybe you've heard that. Maybe you have these things called automatic thoughts, which tell you you're a failure, which tells you nobody could ever love you, which tells you you're a fraud. And what the psychiatrist, and these are automatic thoughts because they're just sort of true at a deep subconscious level. And what my psychiatrist did is they helped me slow down and talk through these thoughts. They also gave me little tricks. Like, have y'all ever heard of mindfulness? Everybody talks about mindfulness now. Mindfulness is really helpful, and all mindfulness is using your five senses to be present in this moment. Because if you're depressed, you're looking in the past. You have shame about the past. If you're anxious, your mind's always in the future. What might happen? And what mindfulness does, as well as like breathing techniques and muscle tension things, all these little tricks that really help calm you down and get your brain focused right here. But just straight up, old-fashioned good mental health care, cognitive behavioral therapy. I still go once a month, and it's really important to keep me healthy. And then the last one is spiritual, and we'll get into that too. So those are the three legs of the stool: the physiological, the psychological, and the spiritual.
So you talked some already about coming to the realization that you were depressed. And some of us might be wondering if we have depression or are struggling with something else. Mm-hmm. How would you define depression?
Yeah, well, number one, I'd say that all the things online are very accurate, especially from reputable sources, right? Like WebMD or Psychology Today, or the what do you call it? The Mayo Clinic. All of these really reputable online sources, and so your classic definition, you've lost interest in things that you used to enjoy. There's this deep sense of hopelessness, this deep sense of pointlessness. You can feel numb at times, and there's just this overriding sense of dread, right? But I would say that if you're wondering if you have depression, literally do an online screening by a reputable place. If I'd done my research, I would have given you a reputable place. I'll do it. I'll actually ask my guy tomorrow, because I'm seeing him tomorrow. I'll find out what he does. But I would also say too is that really any medical health professional can put you through a screening pretty quick. I'm sure the Citadel has a ton of resources there. Part of the mourning of a mental illness is to realize that you're just like everyone else. I thought I was sophisticated and complicated and all this kind of stuff, but part of the mourning is just to realize that you've got everything in common with other depressed people too. Those are helpful. But if you're looking for a really quick definition of depression, maybe more at sort of the empathetic level. My psychiatrist said a quick definition of depression is anger turned inward. Hatred turned inward. You hate yourself all the time.
How would you say that this has changed the way that you look at your faith? Does knowing Jesus make any difference for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been huge. And y'all know that part in 2 Corinthians 12 where Paul talks about the thorn in his side, right? And 3 times it pleaded with the Lord. A thorn was given him to humble him, and he didn't want it. It was slowing him down. We don't know if it was an illness or what it was. We're not sure. But it was slowing him down. He didn't want it. It was getting in his way. He's like, Lord, heal me of this, heal me of this, heal me of this. And the Lord said, no. That you will learn my perfect love through this, and you will learn that my grace is sufficient for you. And so a big overarching answer I'd have to this question is, well, I wish if I could walk over and flip off depression and anxiety like I do these, like I could these light switches. Boy, it'd be great, right? It'd be great to be free of it. That being said, my walk with the Lord and his church and my brothers and sisters in Christ and my wife and my children and all this stuff, through my time being with the generalized anxiety has actually brought me deeper into faith. It's helped me understand what sin really is. It's helped me understand what a redemption really is. And just some details here. But looking at, it really helped me because I had to dig down deep. Why am I this way, right? And it pulled me deep into what sin really is. I think oftentimes our first understanding of sin is it's a choice or it's an action that we do. But as we read the Bible and study more, we realize it's more of a heart posture. Like we're selfish and we do things that benefit us. But then as we study the impacts of sin even more, what we realize is that all of us, our whole selves, not just our souls, but our bodies and our psychology and our minds as well, are poisoned by sin. And I remember reading something online where they're wrestling with a depression, and they're saying, my own mind is trying to destroy me. My own mind is trying to destroy me. And I was like, that is such an accurate description. Also, too, when you look back at Genesis 3 at the fall, remember, with human sin, it wasn't just that we went out of relationship and we became enemies with God. We became enemies with each other. We became enemies with his creation. We exploited it. We also became enemies to ourselves. There's this deep shame of I'm not what I should be. And so at one level, it brought me sort of deeper into both the responsibilities I have as a sinner, right? But at the same time, that all of my depression is wrapped up in sin, which then led me to the better news. If I'm going to say what the bullet points are, when you're depressed, right? When you're anxious, but especially when you're depressed, which I've wrestled with more of late, you're at a relationship with yourself. And your ability to look at yourself as you truly are is flawed. It's skewed. It's like wearing bad lenses, right? If you wear glasses, the lenses are going to distort it unless it's the right prescription. And what I learned is that when I'm in a depressive episode or when I have depressive thoughts, right, that I just need to tell myself to shut the hell up. Literally, shut the hell up. Because I can't accurately judge myself. And if you're looking for one Bible verse that I go to all the time, it's 1 Corinthians 4, verse 3. And Paul's talking about the way or the level at which he does not let other people's opinions of him define himself, but he takes it to a deeper place. And he says this, but with me it is a very small thing that I should be judged by you or by the human court. Okay, fine, I don't care what you think. Then he says this, I do not even judge myself. What he's saying is not only does their opinion of me not matter, my opinion of me doesn't matter. Because I overinflate it? Well, sometimes, but it's more to cover up for the fact that I'm so loathsome towards myself. And so if you don't judge me and I don't judge me, well, then who do I look to for my definition of who I am? And that is, of course, the Lord Jesus Christ. If you haven't looked deeply into the fact that Jesus, if you're a Christian, has adopted you. He chose you to be his own. He brought you into his family. He bound you to himself. He literally wove you into his body. Though despite my sinfulness, he still loves me. He still rejoices over me. My definition is an adopted Most High, an adopted Prince of Heaven, adopted by the Most High God, the beloved brother of Jesus Christ. That's who I am, whether I think it's true or not. And that has done a tremendous amount of healing for me. And then one more point here on that. Romans 8:28, right? Nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. When you're in a depressive state, part of the thing that's so unsettling if you're a Christian is you feel numb. You feel disengaged from God. You feel like God's absent and you just got nothing for him. And what I was really comforted by, once again, is part of the adoption, is that I'm also, because I'm in his family, right? I can't break that. I can't pull myself out of that. And that even though I feel like I've let go of him, he has not and will not let go of me. More I can say there, but I'm a rambler.
Well, that's actually my next question. I think for some of us it's really hard when God feels absent or when God feels really far away. So would you talk about what you do when God feels like he's just not there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing I'd say is remember your own mind is lying. Don't trust yourself, right? And then focus on the covenant, right? What is a covenant? A covenant is not a contract. A covenant is literally one person saying, I'm binding myself to you and making you mine forever. And there's nothing that you can do to ever change that, right? I'm pulling you in. So all of us are members of families, right? There are times where you're a great son or daughter. There are times where you're a terrible son or daughter. But at no point is your place in your family ever in jeopardy, right? And so it's incredibly comforting to know that while I'm at my emotional worst, while I feel numb, I feel like everything's pointless and hopeless and all this is just made up, that God's just smiling at me and saying, all right, well, we're going to ride this out with each other and I'm never letting you go. And then just really practically, and I've been dealing with this for over 10 years now. I know that that'll pass. When I feel those things, it feels like it'll last forever, but I know it'll pass.
So some of us have grown up in church background and others of us have not, but for those of us who have, oftentimes there is a view that people who know Jesus should not struggle with anxiety or should not struggle with depression.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's not true. That's a lie. I'm ripping all this off from Tim Keller, so I'll at least give him credit for it. When it comes to mental illness, not just the church, but really every segment of our society is reductionistic, right? We say, oh, well, so if you're a doctor, okay, you view depression as a physiological problem, that if I give you the right medicine, it will fix your physiological problem and then you'll be okay. If you are a psychologist, and I'm speaking in broad brushstrokes here, right? It's just a psychological problem. So if we give you the right counseling, right? If we get your self-understanding right and we get rid of this self-loathing and we teach you to love yourself, then that'll fix the problem. Sadly, what some of people in the church have said is, well, you shouldn't be depressed. That's a spiritual problem. You don't have enough faith. You don't have enough understanding. So let me preach to you once again the gospel. And if you really understood all of this stuff, it would cure you. It's a matter of spiritual knowledge, right? Or you need to pray more, or go do this more. The reality is that the biblical understanding of the human being is that we are complex creatures, and our bodies and our psyches and our spirits can't be separated into different parts. They all sort of swirl together in this one big mass. And so I would say that, number one, it's important to treat all parts of this. But number two, some of the greatest Christians that have been pastors were depressed. If you come from the Baptist background, Charles Spurgeon was clinically depressed. You could even say that at times Jesus showed signs of depression, if you will, though he didn't have it, but certainly sadness and fear. Lord, if this cup can pass from me, please let it, right? My God, why have you forsaken me? If there's ever a cry of the human heart, Jürgen Moltmann said this is true of all people, but it's on steroids if you're depressed. My God, why have you forsaken me? And in the same way that we wouldn't say that somebody with cancer shouldn't have cancer if they're a Christian, shouldn't have diabetes, in the same way you can't say that mental illness is a problem simply of faith.
So one aspect of being a student here, I hear a lot that there's sort of an environmental drive to do better and be better all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when you feel like you're stuck and that you're overwhelmed and that you can't just do better?
Yeah, well, yeah, I have those feelings every day. Sunday afternoons are awful, right? If you ever want to get me at kind of the peak point of depression just breaking in on me, and I'm telling myself the truths of the gospel, and I'm reminding myself to not listen to myself, it's on Sunday afternoons, because I've just finished my performance, which is church on Sunday, right? And if I don't get a standing ovation with people throwing flowers at me, I'm a total failure, right? That's what my lying brain says to me, that I'm totally ineffective towards God, and God's so disappointed, and I'm such a failure, and I've fooled people to come into my church, and all these thoughts seem so believable, but they come from an absolutely BS assumption. And so I feel them all the time, and frankly, I just tell myself, once again, all the things I've told you. There's this part of cognitive behavioral therapy is called positive self-talk. Now, if you're a non-Christian, that often takes the form of, you're beautiful, you're perfect, you don't have any flaws, you're basically a good person, you just need some help. If you're a Christian, the positive self-talk is to remind yourself of who you are in Jesus. And you're a sinner, yeah, but you're his chosen, you're his beloved, he rejoices over you. He's just overwhelmed by love for you. And y'all know how y'all do communion at St. Alban's every Monday, right? And Jesus says, hey, we're going to go over the story again, right? Because you've forgotten it this week. You're a sinner, but you're still welcome at my table. My body's been broken for you. My blood's been spilled for you. Come and partake of all that I am, because all that I have is yours. We do the same liturgy every Sunday. Why? Well, Jesus tells us why. Do this in remembrance of me. And so my great trick is to tell myself the same thing over and over and over again, that I'm his beloved. There's more to it. There's some situational stuff, but that's really it. I just remind myself of the deep promises of the gospel. When I'm in a really low place, I really check on things like, what am I eating? Am I eating a lot of, starches and fats and, sugars, and what you put in your body matters, because it'll make your mood go up and down. Am I drinking too much alcohol? When I was first diagnosed with that, I really acted out with a lot of alcohol consumption, amongst other things. And then one thing that's been really helpful too, to sort of give the bigger picture, because what cognitive behavioral therapy does, what your psychiatrist does, is he gets you out of your own head, and he gives you a bigger picture and lets you think of perspectives you wouldn't have thought of on your own. And one of those, from a theological standpoint, is the thorns and thistles of this world. If you're like me, and maybe some of you suffer from this, anything that goes wrong in your world, you can always find a way that it's your fault. You could have prevented it if you'd just been smart, if you'd been more diligent. You should have saw that coming. And so therefore, you essentially make yourself God, right? One of the really healing parts of the Christian understanding of the world in which we live is that, a lot of, or sometimes pain in our life is caused by our own foolishness. But sometimes it's caused by someone else's foolishness. Sometimes it's caused just because it's just the world just grows up thorns and thistles to frustrate the work that we're doing. And walking that fine line between saying, well, nothing's my fault, it's all thorns and thistles, but With depression and anxiety, that's not the error. Everything's my fault. Everything's my fault. You can see how that drives anxiety, right? Because you're like, oh, I got to constantly be on guard, and this might happen, and this might happen. I mean, COVID brought it out of so many of us, right? But really understanding, too, in addition that I'm a sinner, so I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not the exception to the sin rule. I'm going to blow it once in a while. God's sovereign over even my mistakes. He's going to fix all the things that I've messed up. In addition to the fact that I'm his beloved, and in addition to the thorns and thistles. Well, I'll just leave it there. Those are really helpful when I need to constantly remind myself what is true.
I just want to do this one really quick because I told someone that we would ask this question. There's a couple of us in here who are interested in ministry or chaplaincy. Just really quick, what's one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who's interested in ministry, maybe struggling with mental health?
Well, I've got three.
Okay.
I've got three. The first one is this. It doesn't disqualify you. It does not disqualify you from ordained ministry or from lay ministry in God's church. It's a treatable, manageable illness. And as long as you're aware of it, it is a lifelong illness, right? I think part of the mourning is that you're not just going to wake up one day and not be depressed or anxious. It'll ebb and flow. It's lifelong, but it's treatable. It's treatable. And you can function. And you'll have good days, and you'll have bad days, and you'll have terrible days. But it will not disqualify you. Moreover, I've already talked about this a little bit, that it can be a place where you grow in your faith. I've already touched on that, how it made me dive more deeply into the gospel, really to dig down deep into and who am I? Right? If I can't define myself, if I'm letting Jesus define me, then what does that look like? And it was really a catalyst. I probably wouldn't have learned as much about human sin, my sin, the causes of it, the brokenness of the world, the great love of our Savior, the great covenant promises, right? That He'll carry us through difficult times. When we let go of Him, He won't let go of us. I wouldn't have really understood the power of that had I not had depression and anxiety. And then the last thing is what I'm doing right now. This is not only this is 2 Corinthians Corinthians 1 verses 3 through 4. This helps you understand the purpose of pain and suffering, or at least one dimension of it. But for our purposes, listen to what Paul says here. In the context of 2 Corinthians, is Paul's getting hammered by these really arrogant Christians at Corinth who thought that they were super apostles. And if you were a real Christian, you'd never suffer, right? Suffering is always bad. And so Paul starts off his letter like this. Blessed be God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in our afflictions. Why? So that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. Not only does it not disqualify you, not only does it become the thorn in your side where you begin to know that the grace of our Lord Jesus is sufficient for you, but it actually equips you to be an incredibly powerful and persuasive and useful pastor to someone else who's suffering the same way that you are, but you've tasted how the Lord can bring you through it. Whenever anyone in my congregation gets breast cancer, usually it's women, I give them the normal sort of, the Lord loves you, He's with you, and I quickly get them to someone in our church who's walked with the Lord through breast cancer, because they can do for them something that I never can. And in the same way, what ends up being what you think is a disqualifier actually makes you more powerful than you would have been without it. to heal.
Last one, and then we'll take a quick 3-minute break. How can I be a good friend to somebody who is struggling with anxiety or depression?
Yeah. It's just really, it's so simple, it's embarrassing. Listen. Don't try to fix them, right? Some of us, whenever somebody's coming to us with a problem, some of us, our default is to help them, to fix them. Some of them is to downplay it. Some of them is to distract them. Don't do any of that stuff. If you're an interrupter, bring a little notepad or use your phone and just sit there and just write the questions you want to ask and interrupt them. But I'll never forget, I have a dear friend. He's gone from someone that I'd mentor, and now he's a dear brother in Christ. He's a priest at St. Philip's. His name is Justin Hare, and he has some similar issues, but he's a guy I can trust. And I'll call him, and I said, man, I'm having a really bad day of depression. You know what he says? It's the most brilliant thing. I'm so sorry. That must be awful. That must be awful. Because sadly, just like you have pointed out, Anna, is that even outside of the church, there is a belief that depression is a choice. The worst thing you could ever say to a depressed person is give them 2 or 3 bits of advice and just say, just think about these, and you'll be, or just go out and do something. And let me just distract you. Or I wish I had time to just be depressed. I'm too busy living real life. So the best thing that you can ever do is just say, how are you? That sounds terrible. What would you like for me to do? Do you want to talk? Do you want me to listen? Sometimes it's just nice when somebody else knows.
Well, thank you so much.
And I do want to, as a way of summing this up, there's a prayer, and it's actually all the modern prayers about depression and anxiety I found really weak. My favorite prayer for someone who is depressed was written 400 years ago. Actually 500 years ago by a guy named Thomas Cranmer. And so there was no depression, there was no diagnosis, but this nails it. And it's called A Prayer for Persons Troubled in Mind or in Conscience, okay? And it says this: O blessed Lord, the Father of all mercies and the God of all comforts. We've heard that. We beseech thee, look down in pity and compassion upon this thy afflicted servant. Thou writest bitter things against him and makest him to possess his former iniquities. You're remembering your sins, right? Thy wrath lieth hard upon him, and his soul is full of trouble. So you only sort of see the sin part. But, O merciful Lord, who has written thy holy word for our learning, that we, through patience and comfort and the comfort of the Holy Scriptures, might have hope. Here's the key part. Give him or her a right understanding of himself and of thy threats and promises, that she may neither cast away his or her confidence in thee, nor place it anywhere but in thee. And it goes on, but for the sake of time, what's so brilliant about this and what depression is it is a wrong understanding of ourselves. That's so deeply programmed, written on our brains, be it from DNA, it's DNA and its surroundings and its important people in your life who have failed you, parents or coaches or whoever, friends. All this is written on us, but what we come out of life with is a pair of glasses that looks at ourselves and it's distorted. And what the gospel does, along with the medicine and the psychotherapy, is it brings us back to a right understanding of ourselves.
Thank you so much. So what we're going to do now, we're going to take a 3-minute break. That's my number. You can text me questions. I've already got one. And then we'll ask those. And then we'll be done. Sing one more song and then we'll be done. So I'll call us back in maybe 3 minutes. Question that I think is really insightful, and I'll just ask it real real quick, and then I have one more thing to add before we wrap up with one final song. So this question says, how does anxiety and depression mess with you on a day-to-day life?
Oh, yeah.
And how do you think it might open the door for PTSD? And I think maybe, I'll add to that, do you think that it opens the door for, I think maybe there's a fear of things getting worse or becoming something else.
Right. So if you could, so can you read that question again?
Yeah. How does anxiety?
I used to be a lawyer, so I'm very, very particular.
How does anxiety affect you on a day-to-day life? In your day-to-day life?
Yeah.
And then does it
have
the potential to become something else?
Right. So let me just take the first one. The answer is yeah. I mean, like any chronic condition, there's going to be some aspect of it, right, that hits me. I think so. What's helpful is to continue with like normal with just my normal regime of therapy, right? Stay on my medicine. Continue to go to cognitive behavioral therapy. Continue to use the skills that they gave me. Really use mindfulness, right? Mindfulness isn't just a way to get out of a depressive episode or an episode of anxiety. It's a way to stay healthy. I'm tempted to dive into the what happens to your brain, but what mindfulness does is it allows the part of your brain which takes over fight or flight to calm down, and it allows the frontal cortex which is where your rational thought is, to play a much bigger role. But I would say that, some days I wake up and it's almost like you wake up and you feel it, right? It's just like, oh God, it's going to be one of those days. And at that point, you can either choose to let it overwhelm you, or you can choose to say, I'm just going to ignore it and fight it off. Or you can do what I think is a healthier way, and what my psychiatrist said is a healthier way, and just say, today's going to be an off day. So let's just give yourself some grace, give yourself some peace. And maybe if you've planned on 10 things, let's do 6. And let's take another break. Let's just take a break in the middle of the day, right? Let's just because the temptation is to fight or flight, right? The temptation is, in mine, I'm a hider. So I will hide myself in Netflix, and I'll hide myself in YouTube videos, and I'll hunker down and hide from the world. So I get 0 done. Others of us, we're going to fight it, and we're going to go through, and we're going to do all these things. We're going to accomplish all 10, and we're freaking miserable the whole day, and angry and bitter, and we say things we shouldn't say, and screw up work because our mind isn't there. We're just bitter about it. Once again, a psychiatrist is helpful, or a counselor, not even a psychiatrist, but any licensed counselor is helpful to give you skills to deal with good and bad days. It's just more part of how it is, part of my day every day. And it's frustrating, but giving in totally to it's not the answer. Fighting against it with all of my rage isn't the answer. Finding a way to get through to today okay is what I do. Am I afraid it might turn into something more? I'm an old man, okay? I'm 47 years old. My brother he's bipolar. So bipolar, if you will, is sort of generalized anxiety disorder on steroids. So he goes way high and way low. And there was a time where I was worried about that. The thing about y'all's age is now is about the time where if you're predisposed to depression, the stresses of this place, especially the stresses of adult life, are going to begin to fan the flames of that. Here's the good news. Go talk to somebody. They will tell you if this is the beginning of something greater, of something bigger, of a bigger mental illness. Is it, and then maybe with the PTSD thing, is the question, is the real thing there, is this a symptom of maybe something I haven't dealt with before? Is that what that's getting at?
Maybe so, yeah, or maybe a fear that it would
blossom into that?
Yeah.
Well, the thing with PTSD, and I'm a little bit outside of my my depth, but that's never stopped me, so I'm going to keep on going. Is that anxiety and depression doesn't cause PTSD. PTSD causes anxiety and depression. In part of my cognitive behavioral therapy time, my counselor asked me a ton of questions. Memories matter. This shouldn't be rocket science, but it's fascinating. When you look at the memories that stick in your mind, right, like that are like vivid as the day it happened, they're normally either really bad or really good. And when you think about it, that makes sense, because if something really bad happened to you, your brain's going to say, don't let that happen again, and I'm going to help you remember that by giving you this really vivid memory. And so we talked about memories. We talked about, what do you remember, Hamilton, from your childhood, just even if you think it's totally irrelevant. And so some of those things were part of the larger concoction of what gave me generalized anxiety disorder. It's not as simple as this caused that. It's always a combination of things. A good counselor, or any counselor, can really help you maybe trace that back to some places. The thing about depression is that you're always going to have anxiety with it, even if depression seems to be the major symptom. Likewise, with anxiety, you're going to have depression too. It's two sides of the same coin. If anxiety reigns in your heart, no surprise, you're going to go straight from I'm anxious to I'm going to be crazy for the rest of my life, right? I mean, that's what your brain's going to tell you, because it's on overdrive, and you're going to think the worst thoughts possible. What will help give you peace, because it gave me peace, was talking to a professional who could get me outside of my own head and realize what was really happening.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Let's give Hamilton Walt and Rob and me are here on Jesus' behalf to listen to you and love you. If you are struggling with any of those things, if you are having thoughts of self-harm, we would love to listen to you. And we can help get you connected if you're maybe searching for a way to get help, whether that's counseling or something else. We would really love to help you.
If I can say two things. My counselor asked me one time, have you ever thought about hurting yourself? And I knew if I answer yes, I'm going to the hospital, I'm going to the loony bin for a month, I'm going to get fired, it's all over. But the Spirit said, no, just tell him. And I did. And he didn't freak out. They're not going to freak out, right? But he began the process of giving me the help that I needed. Last thing I'll say is, there's hope. There's hope. There's hope.
Well, would you
Yeah, I just have one thing to say. We have money set aside in our budget to pay for counseling for you guys. Sometimes, depending on your situation here, the situation in process of the military, your parents, you may not want anyone else to know that you went and got talked about. So we have ways to make that happen, and no one needs to know. So I want you guys to know that. No one should ever feel trapped.